Yeah, I thought about that one too.
H flat.
So Marjorie's coming up.
Yeah. Did you ever figure out what high bob was? Did you ever remember?
Who remembers why there was an
International Bus Convention.
Yeah, that's high bob. What was high bob? There was a.
Next year was high bob. I can't remember
Hot.
We have to win now.
Right, it's not too early out there. Get him up.
He wakes up really early.
Hacker International Bus Convention.
We didn't know hackers. We didn't know hackers from anybody. Not in 1990. Heaven help us.
Yes.
Is that it? Is that your keynote? It's a different kind of a keynote.
That's where we have the champagne.
That's the low note. Are you giving the low note address? I'm
Good
sorry.
morning, Larry.
Oh,
Oh, you're actually calling Larry?
Yeah, this is Larry. Say hi, Larry.
Hi, Larry!
We're it's Suzanne.
Suzanne who? I don't remember Suzanne
We're
Knox.
waiting for Marjorie and for Bill to give us the address. And what's the reward that we got?
Yeah, we need to.
Or for the best answer.
Heard too much talk about how the first year was snow. Yeah, I think the second year was snow. Yeah. I heard like a lot of complaints about that, and I'd just like to say at this point that you're all a bunch of wimps.
What is it? H stand for?
Heretical.
So I'm gonna read this thing. Sorry guys, but there being a level of formality to this.
See it without your
I can see
glasses. What
that. One word per page. When I lived, this is called On the Cusp. Dance in the oral tradition of the digital age. Can you all hear me? Is this going to work? Okay. When I lived in Rockport, I lived for quite a while in an old brick home set back a great distance from the road. It had a barn, a carriage house, and a two-story brick house which was built around 1875. Originally a working farm, it was on top of a deeply sloping hill next to a woods, and through the woods a graveyard. When I drove down the long driveway to the house, I felt as if I were entering another time, isolated from the stress of contemporary life. I adored this home. It had peace, calm, and a natural beauty of architecture and location. It was owned by the richest man in Rockport, and I felt lucky to live in it and take care of it, and it took care of me. The richest man decided he would take advantage of an offer he couldn't refuse to get richer. So he sold the hill in front of the house and the barn to Walmart, who excavated the hill precipitously, burned down the barn, and built a Walmart plaza almost directly beneath my front window, leaving the house perched above the scenic Walmart rooftop. I thought of staying anyway, or of strapping on explosives, or of casting a curse, so at a moment of sensibleness opted for the latter. I moved out, and the curse, I'm pleased to say, was eminently effective. the plaza now lies empty and decaying. The richest man sold the house to a motel chain, which knocked down the house and the carriage house and built a beautiful motel there. I've checked, and I'm pleased to say that none of you in this conference are staying in the motel, because if you were, I would have to kill you.
What's it called?
What?
What's the hotel?
Yeah, which it is. But
It was Holiday Inn Express.
yeah, it was that.
Holiday.
Is that it? It's Dollar Tree. Oh.
Same thing.
If I was wrong, some of you might want to make your peace with
Look
your
under
fate.
your mattresses.
That was a great place. From this house on started a trend towards wanting to live not exactly in this century. In my current apartment in New York, I finally got rid of the television and have been almost overcome by the desire for a harpsichord to go with my piano, guitars, and ukuleles and rocking chairs. In my bedroom where my electronic studio resides, I finally built a box around it, like a large wardrobe, and put an attractive curtain across the electronics to pretend that it wasn't there, except when I used it. You're asking yourself whether I went all the way to quill pens and inkwell, and you'll be pleased to hear I've so far resisted, so intervention is not yet necessary. During these last 10 years, I've spent a great deal of time working on a futuristic musical, electronic and accompaniment, sci-fi, sleek and corporate, weird dance, hip and cutting-edge multimedia. I teach video and form the dance and new media program in our department. Psychologically, at some point, I realized I probably had a need for some self-reflection, which is this keynote speech. The only sensible thing to do, I felt, was to blame my problem of a split psyche on a genetic predisposition. So I blamed it on my great-grandparents. They owned a music store in Chicago from 1895 to 1927. They sold pianos. Now, the interesting thing about that was, at the time, everyone felt like they had to have a piano in their home, which, since very little music was available in small town America, it meant that someone in the family had to be able to play or encouraged to learn to play the piano if they were going to have music in their house and gatherings. Imagine these gatherings where people sat around the old high-back upright and sang songs together. Beautiful nostalgic image, don't you think? Sort of like last night. Right. Wanting to further the business, my great-grandmother, after her husband Sam died, took over the business and branched the piano business out into new areas. She had commissioned a Frank Lloyd Wright home sometime earlier, so was a smart, sophisticated woman of the highest order. In the 1920s, she bought an automobile and sold Victrolas and radios in the piano store. So if any of you have any guilt that we have fractured our lives with technology or the internet, or have lost a sense of community, or created a lack of civility, or concerns for the shallowness of contemporary culture, and think that the blame should be laid at the feet of us, the living, give it up. The game was over in 1920 with the car, radio, and the Victrola. The digital internet age is a mere embellishment, a variation on a theme of car, radio, and Victrola. The blame and knowledge doesn't really help you, though. There is still this huge split, but I have embraced it. I teach music for dance class. I allow no cell phones or computers, pencils, papers only. They sit in lines. They are trained to shut up, except when they are performing rhythms, dancing, or singing. I don't pretend to be cool and hip and current anymore. I am a quintessent old fogey teacher. You're training solfeggio, notation, scores, rhythms on the body, and singing. Alex Ross, the New Yorker, and a whole phalanx of pseudo-New liberals teach the equality of all music, and I give no lip service to all that poppycock. I start every day with Bach, even if it means it's all downhill after that. But I also teach dance in new media. It's pass-fail. We sit in a circle. here? No, there is no problem because I am in denial and living quite happily in denial. Thank you very much. Now, dance is also living in denial and living quite happily. I put a question mark after that line. Does it have a problem? No, I love it because it lives in a different world, just like I do. It is the world of the oral tradition. What does that mean? The purest oral traditions have no notation, nor do they live by recording. They are taught person to person by rote. They create works person to person by rote, and they perform person to person by memory. Nothing is written or recorded, and when they do record it, example, Dance in America, no one can see it or use it ever again because they have the tape locked up in vaults in New York City. Compare and contrast to music, 500 years of written tradition, 90 years of recorded tradition, billions of CDs, video, film, analog, digital traditions, but as well, music has a deep oral tradition of teacher to student and live performance. Dance's attempt to be a holdout with a death grip on the oral tradition in the face of every other medium having huge digital and recorded traditions is quite beautiful, really. Our students even now are only marginally media savvy, very superficial and skin deep media savvy, because they've spent their lives so far deeply involved in this oral tradition. Class, rehearsal, and performance. Class, rehearsal, and performance. Repeat, rinse. Little time for digital. And they are hooked. Of course they're hooked. It's an amazing tradition, deep and rich and human. There's only one problem with it. Well, maybe more than one. Number one, it's exhausting. To win over audiences, 50 or 100 people at a time, is slow work and very physical. Number two, you can't make much money. But we're artists, right? Number three, the education as it's currently structured to learn these skills is very expensive. Add it up from the first dance class through college. But please don't ask our grads about their debt load. Keep your eye on the fact that how wonderful they are as artists and started school, and we're making a living convincing them of what they need to know. Okay, so there are these three little problems with the oral tradition in the modern world. You see, the real dilemma is that we are on the cusp of a changing world, and the question we're asking right now is how much it will change and how soon, and we don't know the answer. But this is the one moment of history where this change may happen, and it could be radical. Read the current futurists, I mean the more serious ones, not the way out there ones. If you want to be perplexed and amazed and horrified, read Ray Kurzweil, who looks into the possible future in the next 100 years. And like all of the futurists, posits the time when computers outstrip humans in abilities and suggest ideas were a belief, such as the transfer of human consciousness into digital consciousness. These separate generations now living are the ones that could change everything, that will negotiate this time of transition. So now is the time to think about the losses and gains. If we lose the oral tradition, what do we lose? First, the big loss, it happened well before the digital age. Started by my great-grandparents, Sam and Diddley Hilton. Cars broke down traditional communities. Couples and they're filmed at the center of the villages from which they come. And you realize that these costumes are now in museums, and the dances only occasionally perform and on stages. And there are cars and fast food where the villagers were. I traveled to Vietnam to try to hear traditional music, and it was extremely difficult. But there were many, many karaoke bars. An aside, what's a great example of the artistic or ritual oral tradition experience? A dance class with live music. Maybe it would be even more powerful if it were part of a spiritual practice, but in the right light, it is a spiritual practice. The dance class with tape is one level down. Dancing and singing and live music, one notch up. Dancing and singing and live music outside in the world near to nature, maybe that's the highest level of experience. Every sense is engaged and connected person to person and with the world around you. So were the Africans right all along? Like the Amish might have been right all along. If we in dance become part of the digital tradition, what are the gains? One, it aids our feeble memories. Two, it allows things to be multiplied and transmitted and thus saleable. Three, it allows for the fantastic, the imaginative, the creative at unbelievably beautiful and heightened levels. These are huge gains, and we can't denigrate any of it here. Our memories are feeble, and digital memory is massive. For things to be multiplied and transmitted and thus saleable is an advantage in communication and knowledge and education for dance. And money. And stupid cat pictures. But allowing for the creation of the fantastic is an outgrowth of our creative imagination. And so it's always potentially the highest order. We must stop and look at this for a minute. The digital ability towards the fantastic. Fantastic sound, images, and stories. All of current pop culture, all of film culture, and all media. This digital ability of the fantastic has won out in the race to the new. How does the digital ability of the fantastic work to so powerfully overwhelm all other systems and win? It's because it tricks us. The mind has the ability to be tricked into thinking something is real. That's how we can be sobbing at a movie. We think it's real at some level. I guess you could say the same about Facebook. We think it's real because we want it to be real. We need that intense interactions and intense communications like Facebook. But we all know they aren't real, yet it's just a progression. For years we've already been in this virtual world. Gramophone records were not real. Things happening in the radio, they were not talking to us, and we were not there. We were tricked from much earlier than we think. It's an interesting quality the mind has of being tricked so easily. So there are losses and gains with oral and digital. Of course we can mix them, and we are right now. But we're heading to a world, but are we heading to the world of beautifully mixed and oral and digital traditions? Probably not. Given the arc of the trajectory and lessons from the 20th century, probably we're heading in 20, 30, 50, 80 years to digital winning big. At one level, we dance could say to hell with the digital world and to hell with making money. We in music for dance already said that long ago. Why not learn dance the old-fashioned way? storm came up one night and it didn't knock down the tent. And the rain came in sheets and thunder, and I was on the edge of real fright or awe. And what was so different was how the thunder rolls across the sky overhead. I hadn't experienced that before. I hadn't known how it moves. It had these dimensions, 3 dimensions, and felt symphonic. And I lay in wonder at it. It was quite extraordinary. And I realized I had lived too much inside in the virtual reality called houses. So why am I teaching and pushing dance into the digital world? I want to push us away from screen reality and city reality and car reality. And I think that eventually that with the digital is the slim hope that it will draw us back. It draws in a circle back to Rockport, as it were, where we first sang and danced together. Away from this time we now live in, where we're pulled away from each other, full of screen reality, and back to a version of our primitive selves, that we will be effectively fooled back in the community, and that our dancers will have something to sell, and it is a celebration of community and the fantastic of our brains. Because dance is greatest aspect and asset, and the thing it's here to teach is community. Muse and simple bodies together. And why we're so good at this community in the dance world is because from the first technique class to the last rehearsal, we swim the world of community. What we have to teach the world from music and singing and dance is how to be together. Collaboration and community. And if the digital age doesn't lead us back to community, then it will form us as a species in a new way. And that new way can only be described as incredibly well-fed isolation. Stunning, beautiful, imaginative isolation. And maybe we'll be happy. A community, whether it's real or made through ones and zeros, is the only escape from the promise of the digital age. Thanks. Yeah, talking about these things already in conversations about where we're going. So I'd be curious to hear other thoughts, because I think everybody is sort of here in this group, sort of like me. You know, I think everybody is, not true that you feel those kind of splits.
I work with you. I see what's going on there. The last few years, those capabilities and outposts of digital technology and pushing itself forward. I just want to cheer you up and just want to tell you how much I'm resonating with what you're saying. It's so on the nose, and we share so much more than we've done. It's lovely to hear these words from you.
When I was working with dance students at the University of Culture in Kiev, first hour and a half of our 3-hour session, they were like, what's it trying to do to us? Then I taught them Mozart. No, this touch it. Piano. And it all opened up. It became
experience he had, and it was just built into everybody's comments that an invocation of a culture that has a history that's not tied to digital social media, like it's communal culture, and how that invests spirituality behind what it is they do. And in those invocations, there was this almost unstated articulation that it was better, it was elevated, it was more real in some way because it had that kind of meaning. And so I kept coming back to the same question: is how is it possible in a culture that's been atomized by social media to invest that spirituality in practice? I don't think it's not possible, but when we talk about somebody doing cool music with their iPhones and things like that, at what point does that become a spiritual practice? And how does it become a spiritual practice here? And does the digital community have to be the ones to build a spiritual practice? And I don't know if I'm asking for an answer to that. I just think this is what and I think you were dead on what the issues are. I'd say that.
Yeah, it's Suzanne.
There's a resonance in this topic for everyone.
Because we're not talking about that.
That's the ultimate downer of going there, but I take it wrong.
We just want to think about it.
I'm also appreciative of the fact that everything is said without the word fear being used. I mean, because I don't want to go to that place, of fear and your point that there's always been technology added in, the definition of technology has changed or expanded. Because when you go to fear, that's when everything falls apart.
You mean if we were to experience that fear of the future of things?
At the same time, it's very hard to overlook how emotional it is to don't talk about it. It should be the same. And yeah, we need to question what place fear has in our lives and experience. But I don't think you can deny the appropriateness of grief for in incredibly broad terms, for the displacement of peoples, the loss of experience, the loss of connection, on every side of our being. I think for us all to contemplate this together, it's half excitement and half imagination. And there is a large component that I think we have to acknowledge in order to have a wholeness going forward. Because for us, our thinking is going to be integrated with our bodily experience, with our emotions, and that's what we've all, chosen lives that will let us do. So it's inherently messy, and I think usefully messy. I also think that the questions you're asking, I see them being asked in a purposeful, more deliberate way by a lot of different groups of people around the planet. There seem to be a lot of organizations with indigenous peoples, like political organizations, spiritual organizations, retreat centers, political initiatives, addressing what has been lost in the way that life was lived and the way that life is lived. And, asking very consciously upon what foundations do we build and what kind of future. So we're hardly alone in asking this. And it also seems to me we have no idea how to answer any of these questions about what the digital age will bring, whether we're going to be holographically satisfied or holographically starved. It's really, in some ways, as interested as we are in working towards that, we work it out. But our more important work is right here in the present, what it's like to do it, what it's, trying to make singing happen with each other. We have to live good lives as we build this future. That's the only way to make it in the future. You can't, just jump into what's going to be.
I brought this up with my students who are seeming younger and younger to me, of course. I brought up the whole issue with them, and I said, how are you guys doing with this? And they said to me, we have a completely different perspective than this. We grew up with all the technology. This is normal for us. It's not a change in our life. We didn't know anything different. We haven't lost anything. But we realize that we need the other side, and we are balancing it. We're all on Facebook. We're all doing all this stuff. It's easy for us. It's no big deal. But we are all in content and conversation, which is where we're gaining this sense of community. It is visceral. There's debates about, we can debate how intimate that is. That's another issue. But I just had a birthday, so I lost it. But okay, so here's what I want to say. My students seem to be able to find a way to balance this in the sense of, in my class, I did this old-fashioned ritual, dance ritual, singing, all of this stuff back to the earth. And inevitably in the end, they say, this was one of our most meaningful classes to us. When I sing, and that resonance is real and live, they're lying on the floor, they can feel it. They go to a place and they're like, oh, Professor Queen, we get it. So I think that there is hope in the young people trying to figure out how to balance this on their own. And they're definitely coming from a different place. We've lost something. We're struggling. It's hard for us to learn it. I'm speaking for everyone, but it's hard for me to learn too much. I work and work and work at it. The students don't. Whatever, we'll sit here for hours and hours. It's no big deal. We're not scared of this. So I think that the statement I want to make is that I think that I am hopeful about the young people, that they will find a way to balance it, and they must. We struggle with a little bit more than they do. That's all.
Just want to throw in that, technology. I was about a month and a half ago, I was in a Bedouin community in Palestinian territories in the Sheikh. It was this beautiful, old thing, the road with a big mustache, speaking beautiful Hebrew, actually. It started John Gray talking about his people, I'm a Jewish person, so it's a great confrontation with the stuff going on. It was a very culturally rich moment. And at one point, pulling out an iPhone and started chatting on an iPhone. And my point is, it's about the people and not about the machines. And it's all a glorified pencil. It's a beautiful pencil. I have not seen the fantastic yet with these machines as much as I would expect it or hope for it or want it. And I'm not sure that I'll be more interested in dancing the hologram as a person. But I'm fascinated by it. But if we steal it, the oral culture that you're talking about, this communal culture, if we are in charge of it, because it's really about commercial, corporate versus individualism in the end. It's about, are we going to be watered down by our commercial? Is it all going to be a melting pot of Dunkin' Donuts? That's the culture that we live in, bigger culture. Whereas the 57 channels and nothing on it kind of thing. Whatever it is, thousands. I mean, it's about us. And if we, I think, the dance music community, if we can steer this technology, as Bill is sort of doing, right, let's do that. And let's make it about the individual. Let's carve the individual to be the one who's leading us to make this pencil really fantastic. That'd be cool.
I have a lot of hope because of the way that you put it. Were they afraid of the car? Of course they were, right? That's why you asked the question. And specifically with music, so Bartok wrote about what's lost with the piano as opposed to the voice. John Philip Sousa wrote about the menace of mechanical music.
Just
Suso wrote about the menace of mechanical music and the threat of the phonograph destroying the possibility of amateur musicianship.
Yeah.
You know, but we also know that people have done nice things with the piano. People have
Nice things. I like that nice thing.
the phonograph and the sound recording. People have obviously done beautiful. I think this, yeah. I think without fail, there is fear on the one side, and there's also an excess of optimism about how transformative technologies are going to be, and people always work it out. I just don't see any of the technologies we're talking about being so fundamentally different. I think they always look fundamentally different when you're in it. But I'm not sure what the argument. I mean, we could be worried about things that are going to destroy the planet, like those kind of limit cases. But I'm not worried about. So we could be worried about the future of life on this planet or something like that. But I'm not worried about the future of music or dance.
I'm worried about the future of dance because just even as it's going now, I don't see our students can make it with $80,000, $100,000, $120,000 yet. I don't see that's going to work.
Well, if that doesn't work,
Something else
I
will
mean, the bubble, we're living in this little bubble of university dance programs.
Yeah.
They never existed until, 50 years ago or whatever. And so maybe they'll have a 100-year run and they'll peter out. It's not like the university dance department is a sacred institution or anything, And the other point I was going to make is that there are other things that are splitting us apart besides technology. Just think about overpopulation. Think about your virtual city there where all these people are on the sidewalk, and because there are so many people, there is more isolation among them, right? So there are other things. I think overpopulation is even perhaps more of an isolating influence than, quote, technology. Technology might be a human solution to that very problem. I don't know.
Well, I think that we all live in a global atmosphere of fear. But I'm reminded of a John Cale lyric where he says, "Fear, fear is a man's best friend." Why is that? Because we have this latent ability to generate courage. And it's fear that wakes us up to that. Because we can become very complacent, and what we all can benefit from is activating that courage. When I occasionally do a radio show, I always end it by